All right, so today in the podcast we have some guests, David and Dawn COOP, and they have a unique relationship to Douglas Clark and Carol Bundy. And so Laura, they met Laura, and they shared some audio recordings with her that they did years ago. So wanted to kind of first just both Dave, we'll go with you, Dave, first, and then Dawn. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Dave, and tell us why you have these tapes and what and how long were they recorded ago, and what was the purpose for this whole recording Carol and Douglas.
Okay. So I'll let you. I'll kind of go back to the beginning. I'm from Los Angeles, born and raised, and me and my wife were very curious about why there was so many serial killers in the 70s. So we started reaching out to the 70s serial killers to write a book about this phenomena of these serial killers. And so I put my number on all of them, and Doug was the first one to call, and then he just kept calling me every day, every single day. And Laura, you know, he talks so much. So we developed this relationship with him where he was giving us stuff like, I'm innocent, I'm getting framed, I was framed, I have these documents to show the things they didn't let me allow in court. And so that's how we got kind of wrapped into it. Now, that recording that you heard of Carol was actually Mark, what's his last name? Don McNamara?
McNamara. Yeah, I have those articles right here too. Yeah.
Yeah, from Vanity Fair. And he was writing an article on basically he felt that Doug was innocent. And there was a few other people that felt like pretty well-known people that thought Doug was completely innocent. So we got the tapes from him, and that's pretty much how the whole ball started rolling.
Yeah, he was actually featured on the Vanity Fair Confidential episode about Douglas Clark.
Exactly. Exactly. I think the production company or whatever didn't want the angle of what Mark was trying to do, because Mark was trying to say, I don't think Doug did this. It's almost impossible for Doug to do this. But now that we've stepped back and Doug's passed away and we don't talk to him anymore, and now we step back and we look at the whole picture, and we look at the picture and we're like, no, there's something really bad here. But I think it goes deeper than just Doug and Carol.
It's funny because Douglas Clark is the one serial killer I have, esteemed authors and forensic psychologists and even FBI profilers have contacted me saying, I think he's innocent. And I'm like, oh, he has you all fooled.
He does.
Oh, my God.
When Laura was interviewing him, we were recording her for the TV show we were developing with her, and he stumbled, and he admitted it. He admitted that he was there.
Put himself there.
David and Dawn, I should tell you guys that Cindy and Rob actually got to see Clark in action. So they actually recorded me interviewing Clark.
For hours.
So they actually,
But he stumbled. He admitted that he pulled the trigger. He admitted that.
Yeah.
Oh, he admitted he pulled the trigger.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, there you go. There it is.
That is, because he was present at a murder, but
we knew he was present at a murder. He said Carol set it up, and it was 2 days before they arrested him. Done.
Yeah.
He said it, and then he didn't realize he said it, and then he tried to backtrack. But this was literally a few months before he died. I always felt like maybe he had a premonition that he was going to die, and stuff was just flying out of his mouth.
Yeah.
He knew he was gonna die.
Yeah.
He did. He knew it. He was very ill. He knew it. Yeah. He wrote it. I mean, he wrote. Go on, David.
So these recordings. These recordings. Did you guys do these recordings, or are these the recordings that were given to you?
No, these were given to us by Mark McNamara.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
The recordings of Dave and Doug are obviously David. He did those.
So Mark thought Doug was innocent, and it was actually featured on Vanity Fair Confidential too.
Yeah. We have that Vanity
King.
Fair. We saw that
back in the 90s. He was on Larry King in the 90s.
Yeah.
With
Who
Louis
was?
Farr.
Yes.
Mark McNamara.
Oh yeah. He was on with Louise Farr, and Louise Farr was like, she wrote. I don't want to get sued or anything, so I don't want to say anything about that. But let's just. Let's just say that the story I don't think has ever truly been told, and I think that there's a lot more to this than any of us know. I really do. I'm not trying to be dramatic. The stuff I told you off the air, it's just there's just too many coincidences.
Yeah, we had a discussion, at length, and I know you guys are like, I'm done. He's dead. I'm done, and I get it. It's a rabbit hole. It is a rabbit hole.
How much time did you spend talking to Douglas and Carol, or did you talk to Carol or just Douglas?
Just Douglas. Carol was already dead.
She died in 2003. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So let's go back.
Dawn's like the expert.
How did you guys get involved with all of what led you to Douglas Clark? After you decided that you wanted to do something on the 70s, Douglas Clark was the first one that returned your call. So then did that start the conversation? Then you guys just started talking to him, I guess.
Yeah. Constantly. He would call us all the time. He would talk to both of us. And the funny thing is he would talk to my wife one way, and then he would talk to me another way. So you could see we knew that he was playing us at the beginning, but then we got to know this human side when he's telling us about like how much he appreciates the salsa, the fresh salsa they make in San Quentin. You know what I mean? And ridiculous things like that. You forget you're talking to a serial killer, and we just got really wrapped up in it. And I don't know, babe, take it from here. I mean,
we did get really wrapped up into it, but another thing that before we started talking to him that also I think piqued my interest and David's too about his case was the relationship with him and Carol and the way Carol has historically been portrayed throughout this entire thing in the media as this dumpy, very dull.
Babe, try not to move, honey. Try not to move your head too much because every time you move,
your microphone. And it's on my.
I'm like a Time Life operator. It's like right here, but okay.
If you take off the microphone, will it work on just the phone?
Let's see.
Try that.
Let's give it a try.
Because I think sometimes those microphones are weird with StreamYard.
Yeah, totally. It sounds horrible.
I've never used it. I always use it for Zoom. Hold on, let's stop and see what happens next. All right, how about that?
Better? Oh, way better.
Way better.
All right.
Yeah.
That's good. Yeah. So anyway, I was just talking about the experience, Carol, the way she was portrayed, the misogyny and stuff that just makes her basically look like she's completely unable to manage a life, and Doug just swept in and controlled her. I'm like, I don't know, I feel like that's a very one-dimensional way to look at her. So I was really curious, and I worked in human services field and with a lot of women in the Department of Corrections, and you get to see how women are portrayed, sentenced differently. So that really brought me in as well, my interest in that case.
Wait a minute. Hold on one second. So Dawn, tell me. So you worked in corrections?
I was a probation and parole officer for the seriously mentally ill caseload for years, and I was a therapist for the Department of Corrections in Virginia, and I provided like group therapy and stuff in prisons, and also just worked with people that were coming back into the community. So yeah.
So you're a veteran. You're not a rookie.
I'm always learning. Always.
One thing I want to say, and I think this is the perfect place to say this, and I forgot to tell you this, Laura, when we talked the other day, but Doug kind of weaponized you against us. He didn't he did.
Yeah.
Doug, he did bad. So I want to apologize to you. I remember I messaged you once and said, why do you want to talk to Doug? If you want to talk to me, go through me. But he told me to tell you that.
Oh my God, I remember that.
Yes.
I didn't know. I had no idea that was. And Cindy, I called you when he texted me.
Yeah.
Cindy, I called him like, this guy's asking me why I'm talking to Doug.
Yeah, and that was Doug telling me. He's like,
Oh
you
my
need to
God.
contact this Laura Brand woman and tell her that
Wow.
I'm not going to talk to anybody but you guys and blah blah blah. And he was a blowhard, and
I
so I was
remember
like,
you said, "What are my intentions?" I
Yeah.
remember
yes,
that.
Yeah.
yes,
Oh my
And that
God!
was around the
My
same
first,
time that he was
yes.
on camera with us and he spilled his guts without realizing it. And I think
Oh
after
my
that
God!
happened,
Yeah.
and I
Yeah.
told her, I go, he's going to shut you down now because he just realized what he did. And he's
I
been
think
spending his
so.
Oh my
whole
God!
life sitting
I
here,
Yeah.
didn't know that.
creating this narrative
Yeah.
that he's the innocent guy. He was just a bystander. That's his narrative. And then here
Yeah.
he goes and he spills it to her by accident when we're filming him. And then he's like, oh, and then he started acting up with her. And I was like, yeah, that's
And then I got
hilarious.
that message from you, like, "What are your intentions? What are you doing?"
Yes, and then
Oh, that's too funny.
and then it was from there. It was then that phone call. Like I had a cancer scare. Like me and my wife were like just going through it really hard. Like we had some problems, and I was worried about my health. So I was, in and out of the hospital, and I wasn't taking his calls. I wasn't taking his calls at all. And then one day he just stopped calling me. So I was like, okay, well, if he wants to be like that, I can't call him. So, and I'm not going to write after we talk on the phone all the time. So
Right.
then we'll get a phone call from a hospital saying, Douglas Clark wanted you and your wife to handle anything that may happen to him, blah, 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 blah. This doctor, and said he's been in this induced coma for 3 days because they've been trying to reach us for 3 days. And what do you want? What do you guys want us to do basically with Mr. Clark? Like, fuck, I thought we were done with this. So yeah, it's been weird.
So how long did you talk to him for? Like, how many years did you talk to him for?
What do you think, honey? 4? Like 4 years?
Yeah.
Straight.
Yeah,
Straight.
God, every day, every single day.
Almost every day.
Yeah.
I believe it. Yeah.
Yeah. Except
He's
for
a
when he was in
He's a talker.
lockdown. Yeah. And
Yeah.
exactly.
So tell
Yeah,
tell us what you've learned about him in that 4 years of everyday conversation. What did you learn about him? What kind of things you learned about his personality? What was he telling you? What was his narrative?
He is a big old
Why don't you
character.
start,
I'll
honey?
tell you
I
that
think
much. He is everybody else. Don't you think, David? I mean, he's egocentric. He likes to be the center of attention. He wants to be important, and he just snitch on everybody in jail. He's called.
Yeah.
He witnessed a
Mhm.
robbery back in the 70s. I mean, so he is. God,
a matter of fact, it's kind of funny because he would be like on the phone and he would say, yeah, I used to tell Bittaker that if we were out in the streets, I'd shoot him right in the head because he's such a pervert. And I would be like, do you think you should be saying that while you're being recorded from the prison after everything you're accused of? And he's like, no, I would.
Yeah.
They would. San Quentin would hang up, stop our calls because what he was talking about. And it happened several times. Like I'd be talking to him and he'd be like, you violated blah, 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 and this and that. And then he'd call me the next day because he would be just talking about stuff that wasn't good, that he wasn't supposed to be talking about. Guns and how he loved guns and just a bunch of various stuff. But as far as his personality, I mean, he was just, I don't want to insult the guy, but I mean, he was just a talker. He was very full of himself. He liked being a serial killer, although he said he was innocent all the time, but he liked the notoriety he had from being a serial killer.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's a very strange. It was very strange getting to know him. He was a very, very manipulative guy. I think Laura and Dawn could both agree. I mean, he was probably the worst of any I've ever seen, as far as or anybody I've ever known, really.
Yeah. Actually, I remember when you reached out to me and I had said, oh, it's another one of his, the people he's manipulated into he's innocent, who wants to prove his innocence. Another author, it's another forensic psychologist, another person who wants to go on this, crusade for him. and, you know,
Yeah.
an appeal for him. And that's what I thought when you first contacted me, because he had so many people fooled. And I don't see that too often with serial killers, but Doug is one of them. I was really blown away by how many people and how many, you know, notable people he was able to con.
You know what,
Yeah.
though, Laura, I'll say this. Doug, I really was good at that. And the case stunk. The case stunk. That's another reason why I think.
The weapons were at his workplace. The blood was in his storage garage. I mean, his semen was in the decapitated head. I don't know how you refute.
That's the part. I mean, let's just go back for a second. His semen was in the decapitated head. Did you guys ever ask him about these things?
I did.
That's the thing.
I did.
It wasn't his.
Oh no, he gave me a different answer, you guys.
But the
he actually gave me a different answer.
It was the blood type.
The blood tests show a different blood type for the blood and the semen and everything.
He actually told me.
Guys, let's try to talk one at a time here. So
Sorry, go aad. What did he tell you?
I knew it'd be like this. This is a rabbit hole, man. There's nowhere to start here. It's just it's vast. All right, go ahead, Laura. I'm sorry.
What's so funny is he almost crisscrossed the story he gave you guys to me. So with you guys, he said it was a different blood type. For me, he said that was gasoline. The blood was actually gasoline. But then with the semen in the decapitated head, he told you guys it wasn't semen. To me, he told me it was semen, but that was because he ejaculated when she got shot in the head before it was decapitated.
He's such a dope. You know what? And he didn't even tell the story. This is just from the forensic evidence that they had. And they didn't have much, but the court documents, they say
the court documents say.
So he, I don't know, man. That's
I think he was losing it though. After his surgery and the surgeries and stuff, I think he was losing it because
he was.
Yeah, he didn't. I heard some of the podcasts you guys did and some of that recording. He didn't sound like his normal self. I think he was losing a little bit because, like Don was saying, we have like the court documents that show it's a different blood type in Etsy Wilson's head. Yeah. And so there was a lot of things, but see, we're not saying he's innocent at all. We're not saying that.
No.
All we're saying is we think there was other people involved, especially because Gina Moreno was raped by someone very wealthy, and then she ran into the arms of a serial killer. I mean, what are the odds? Let's not mention any names, but you know,
right? The testimony from Carol's preliminary hearing, and this is not Carol's testimony. This is from a police officer that was interviewing her, and this is his testimony. It's Howard Langren. And he says that when he went to the house, after she opens her purse, there's a bullet in there. This is Carol's words, you should be able to match that bullet up to the two girls on Forest Lawn Drive that Jack killed or Doug killed. That's in her preliminary test, the officer's testimony. This is in the testimony right there. And why wasn't Jack ever mentioned in the actual murders? So
he couldn't be mentioned in court.
Right. When he was... They don't even talk about that. Like, what's that about?
There's no statements about him at all in the police files.
Nope.
This is the preliminary. This is for Carol. She never went to trial. She took a plea. But I have the transcripts of the plea, and that's what a police officer is saying. The police officer that went to her house it's got, and I can send it to you, Laura. But it goes through everything she said, and that's the one thing that I was like, man, here it is. Where she literally says she kept it in a jewelry box. She has the
bullet she saved. Yep. Huh? She saved that bullet as a souvenir.
She saved it. It says, after opening the purse, Miss Bundy said, that little jewelry box inside the purse, take that out. There's a bullet in there. You should be able to match that bullet up to the two girls on Forest Lawn Drive that Jack killed or Doug killed. I mean,
I don't know if you listen to all the tapes, Laura, but she also says, I have information. She tells Mark, I have information that would free me, but I'll never say it because it would free Doug too. Yep. So it's I mean, like what we keep coming back down to, I think it was a ring, not just, the case was so badly done, was so bad by the LAPD that they wanted to cover up all their mistakes because they could have saved Etsy Wilson, they could have saved Jack Murray, they could have saved quite a few people. And they didn't because they didn't take Carol serious. And this is all documented stuff. So it's not like conspiracy stuff here.
When she called the police and she was talking, saying, my boyfriend's killing people. He's in his 40s and she describes Jack Murray. You know, she's not described, and it goes on and on. She buys the box. They observe her. Who bought the Ravens? There's only a couple people. Carol's one of them. But they said women don't do those kind of things.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's what they always say.
And then another thing too that was very, very, to me, that was very questionable too, when they came home with Etsy's head and she had two, okay, try to follow me. I don't want to confuse you guys because it's confusing. At this time, they had two apartments. They were leaving one and they moved into another, but they still had a week at the old apartment. So Doug was staying at the old apartment for the last week. Carol was at the new apartment in Burbank. When supposedly they came home with Etsy Wilson's head and Doug took it in the shower and the whole gross story, Carol made a phone call at 3:08 in the morning to the old apartment and talked to somebody for 7 minutes. Who would answer at the old apartment when it was just her and Doug that lived there? And talked for 7 minutes to her. So there was a lot of weird stuff like that when you have like guys like Mark McNamara and guys putting their reputations on the line. For Doug, it was, for us, we got sucked in really easy. But like I said, now that we've stepped back, and especially talking to Laura and what she told me Bittaker said about him, it sounds exactly like how Doug speaks with the pony girl shit and all that. That's exactly the kind of stuff Doug would talk about, except he wouldn't get real graphic like that. He would talk about things like the Wicked Witch and Riding the Wave, and he had all these stupid names for sexual positions. So when you said the pony girl the other day, I was just, when I told Dawn about that, I could see in her face like, fuck, we were totally had. So
we could see how, though. We could totally see how, because the way he talks, he's so
he's really good.
And
I mean,
he really charismatic. He's so charismatic that you get sucked in. It's like a tractor beam, and you're like listening to him. You're like, well, wait a minute, maybe he didn't do this, and he's so convincing. I mean, I think he's textbook. He's really textbook.
He really is. He's like Ted. I always said he's Ted Bundy level. Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. It's almost like they're hypnotic. Like people are just like, what are you saying? No, I believe you. When you see that video of Ted Bundy going, I'm innocent, and everyone's like, oh, he is.
Right.
Doug was the same way.
You could see it in his face. Way. Did you guys do video with him or just on the phone?
We would do whatever. We would do video, phone. He wrote to us all the time. He was constantly sending us documents. That's why I told me and Dawn decided that, we were just going to share all of that with Laura and nobody else. That's it. Good. So we're going to start scanning documents, but it's got to be in some kind of chronological order because, like I said, it's such a deep rabbit hole of information.
Right.
And Laura, like me and you were talking about the other day, look at how the prison is with the files. Why are they being so tight with the file? They released his body to us, but they won't release his files to us. So
the prison wouldn't release the files to them as next of kin and me as a power of attorney. They won't give either one of us the files.
Right.
Nope.
But you have power of attorney.
Doesn't matter. They still won't give it to me.
Doesn't matter.
Did they say why?
Because they released his body to us. I mean,
they got the body, and then we both tried to get the files. They will not give either one of us the files.
Why?
Because they're separate. Yep.
And Laura, I apologize if I sort of like jumped on the thing about the semen and the blood. It's not you. This case has just been like embedded in like.
Trust me, I get it. Yeah. I get it. More than you know, I get it. And I was gonna say to you guys, especially too, like you're seeing some kind of like contradictory evidence with the type of case, when I started digging into Bittaker and Norris, Cindy, Rob, I found the Knott's Berry Farm murder, the third person at the Knott's Berry Farm murder. Who is Gretchen? Where is Gretchen? There was like all these other victims in these, police discovery files. And I'm like, why weren't they investigated? Where are these girls? Who is this third killer? And it's there.
Yes.
That could be the same case with Doug. Is like there could have been another killer. Where is he?
And Carol mentions it in the test. I mean, that she tells cops about.
Well, that's the thing. So wait. So I have a question. So just hypothetically, we're not saying this is real. This is just a hypothetical theory that potentially Jack was the other killer.
I think absolutely Jack was the other killer.
Doug always did say that he was involved.
So Jack was never arrested.
He was killed.
Doug out of. He was killed. Yeah, he was the second to the last murder.
Oh, he was the second to the last.
Carol decapitated him alone in the van.
That's what we're talking about. Okay, all right. Now,
same marks on Exie Wilson for the decapitation.
Same marks.
The same cut they found. So but I'll just you guys keep talking.
Well, I was going to say that it's so funny that you mentioned like the Knott's Berry Farm and the third murder. Who is the third killer? Because Rodney Alcala used to go to Knott's Berry Farm and look for women to kill there.
Same month as Bittaker and Norris too.
Exactly. And then now let's talk about Doug knowing Angelo Bono in 1975. What are the
Doug knew the Hillside Stranglers when they were all out on the street together.
And
say that one more time.
Lauren, say that one more time.
Okay.
Douglas Clark knew the Hillside Stranglers on the street. They all knew each other on the street.
Not only did they know each other.
Hold on. Let's be clear about this. Before the Sunset Murders or before the Hillside Stranglers, Doug knew one of the Hillside Stranglers before any of these murders happened.
Now, this is interesting because today we were just talking to a network executive about this, and we have been saying for the past 5 years, what the hell was going on at the end of the 70s, beginning of the 80s, that there were all of these serial killers operating in Los Angeles and everybody's looking away the other way. What's going on here? There was something going on here.
There is. And I do have the audio tape of Doug talking about knowing them. He told me he knew both of them. And I do have the audio recording of him telling me he knew both of them. He
knew them because their trials were right next door to each other at the same time. So he knew them because they were all on that part of the jail, like when you're.
He told me it was he would go into their shop, their upholstery shop.
Yeah, Angelo's.
Doug was an upholstery shop too. They were both in the same industry.
Yeah.
So that's more than just friends.
But let me straighten that out real quick.
Even stranger is he lived only about a mile or two from Lawrence Bittaker as well, who later became his best friend at San Quentin.
And then they all end up in the same prison, and they're all buddies. In this
not even this prison, Los Angeles County Jail at the same time, and then San Quentin. Yeah.
Okay, how about this? Randy Kraft was the freeway killer, and he was in Long Beach. And about 10 miles up the road is a city named Downey. And that's where the other freeway killer operating at the same time lived, going and killing young boys. And Randy Kraft was killing adult men. And they were operating within 10 miles of each other at the same time, doing the exact same thing.
I just have to correct you on one thing, David. I'm sorry. It's like nails on a chalkboard. Randy Kraft was a scorecard killer. And William Bonin was a freeway killer.
Yeah, but at the same before they caught Randy Kraft, he was called the freeway killer. Once they caught him, then they called him the scorecard because they found his scorecard. So at the beginning, they didn't know who was killing who. It was a big excuse my French, it was a clusterfuck because the LAPD and Orange County weren't communicating with each other, and they didn't know who was responsible for what murders because these two guys were operating at the same time, dumping their victims on the side of the freeway. So that's not tit for tat or anything, but that's how the story is. You know what I mean? So
yes.
And then
yes. And
I mean,
we had Carlo Douglas on. He testified at the Lawrence Bittaker trial, but he also testified at the William Bonin trial. And in our episode, he found out when he got out of jail that his nephew was actually killed by William Bonin, the freeway killer, as well. Mm-hmm.
Well, we found Don found one of the main witnesses we wanted to talk to. The guy that we were just really would have been the one we totally wanted to talk to of all the people involved in the Sunset case. Don found him, and it was his memorial, and he had passed away.
Oh.
He was a witness to the 15-year-old Gina Moreno being raped by this guy and girl. I'm not going to say any names, but he was the witness to it. And in his what did it say in his thing, babe, about the in the funeral?
A woman. I love to look at those. You find so much information and people that are connected. But this woman was just kind of talking about the fun time she had in Hollywood or in Los Angeles in the old days, and that they hung out with Roman Polanski. They hung out with, there was a lot.
Basically they were this witness was very good friends with Roman Polanski and Sharon Tate. That's what I'm trying to get to. So there's so many things that crisscross each other. It's absolutely it's nuts. It's absolutely nuts. And I do think there is. I wouldn't go maybe as deep as somebody like Dave McGowan. I wouldn't go maybe that deep, but I would say there has to be some kind of connection with all these people, man. Just like you guys were talking to the network, there has to be some kind of connection, because how did all this happen without people stopping it, the cops or anything? Go ahead, babe. I'm sorry.
No. I was just going to say this and get it out. Jack Murray was reported to be running porn, smut, right?
Mm-hmm.
We know that Carol groomed kids because she admits to that. She even went to a psychoanalyst and talked to a person with one of her victims. So she's grooming people. In the 60s, she lives in Venice. She's writing for a zine called Psychotic with her partner, Richard Geis. And she called herself Curvy Carol and everything. She was very involved in the kind of, underground.
And what was the name of her zine, babe?
Her zine was called OSS. It was very short-lived. Psychotic, you can still find. And Richard Geis wrote journals and has Carol involved in the journals. So anyway, and then Carol and Jack, thank you for bringing that up. Carol and Jack share a lockbox at a bank with large amounts of money in it. There's that too. I mean, there's just a lot of things that feel like there's even more connections. So that's kind of random, but it's at the same time it's
and then the something else you left out, babe, is the name of her zine was the original name for the CIA.
Yeah.
So very strange things. You know what I mean? Just and it really does.
They work for the movie industry. They both.
Yeah.
Her dad hung himself. Lived in Los Angeles. Her mom died in Orange County of unknown causes. She wasn't sick, but she was alone with Carol. So yeah, she was living in Los Angeles. Her parents were in the movie industry. So there's just.
What movie was she on?
Huh?
What movie was she on?
42nd Street.
That's right. Yeah. Carol was on Miracle on 42nd Street.
Yeah.
Wait, Carol Bundy?
Yeah.
Yes.
As a little baby girl, yeah, because her mom was like a makeup person. Her dad was like a tech guy in films. So she was born in Massachusetts. They moved around a lot, but they ended up in California. I'm not sure when she moved there to that area, but she was living in Southern California for quite a long time and was heavily involved in a subculture there. So I mean, it's not like she's this mom on a lifetime movie where she's just like stumbling into this new world of exciting nightlife. No, she was deep into like some stuff.
Well, it sounded like she was getting girls for him, like pimping them out. That was what she was doing.
She was grooming.
There's more reports in here where she even remarks that she talks about her lesbian. This is her words. her lesbian relationships with children. We're talking about under 12 years old.
Oh my God.
Well, didn't she also, I mean, based upon the tapes that I heard just briefly, that she claims that she was raped when she was younger by
She
her,
was.
and
father.
she was molested, and
Yeah.
she was a horrible childhood, and so I think that probably contributed to all the stuff that she did when she got older. Obviously, I mean, she sounds, I mean, those tapes are they're fascinating because it just really, she lets loose and tells him a lot of stuff. And she even said, she goes, "I'm schizophrenic."
Yeah. See, the thing is, though, Carol never was what they portray her to be. That's what Don was trying to say. Like, she was never that innocent victim, nothing. She was never like that. And
Well,
I'm not saying Jack and Doug,
they never want to say that a female could be a serial killer because there were so few of them. So they always say, it's not possible. Even now, we're working on a case right now where we think there's women potentially involved in this murder, and they're kind of like, no,
automatically dismiss it.
And I'm like, no, don't dismiss women. You can't do that.
No,
and
I'm working with a female psychopath right now too. You guys know the female.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Carol was disturbed on a deep level.
Yes.
Even in psychology classes, and these are dated. I mean, when I went to college and graduate school, maybe it's not that dated, but it's not super recent research. But they would even say, like, if a woman kills someone, then there's something that's worse about her because it's very unusual for a woman to kill. So that that they're making it. It's like, but is it? Because I don't know. I mean, there's anyway.
I call it the Lizzie Borden syndrome. Yeah. The Lizzie Borden syndrome. Like they acquit women because they're like, oh, she couldn't have done it. But if you look at the facts, Lizzie Borden syndrome. But
let's look at the facts real quick here, though. The facts were LAPD checked who was buying when they found Gina and Cindy, who bought Ravens in that area within like the past year or something. There was a list of 12 people, and Carol Bundy was on that list. The investigators said, do the 11, don't do the woman, because women don't do crimes like this.
Yeah. And
this is facts. So this is the kind of stuff that if they would have investigated Carol, there would have been 5 less victims.
Yes.
You know what I mean? So
Laura, have you looked at her Carol's psychological report? Have you read that?
No, do you have it? I would love to look at it.
I'll send it to you. Yeah.
I've questioned, I told you guys the other night when we spoke privately, I had wondered if maybe she did suffer from DID, if that could have been a possibility. But then when I listened to those tapes, her memory recall made me question that. Because it was so sharp.
Yep.
Her memory recall of the crimes is really sharp.
Oh yeah. And then she had an explanation for it. She had an explanation for it too.
Right.
Because he would say, listen, you're kind of off on this. He goes, but you remember everything about that.
Yeah, he called her out on it.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
She remembered smells. She remembered everything. I think Carol was as evil as Jack and Doug and anyone else who was involved in those murders. Carol was. And if those 2 young girls from Huntington Beach weren't murdered, I think there would be no Sunset Strip Slayer case, because I'm with Laura. Me and Don are with Laura when it comes to, I think they were killing way before Cindy and Gina. I think they were killing. We
talked about this, yeah. And I want to bring up something that the 3 of us, kind of talked about, a couple of days ago. Because I had brought up to you the Pony Girl thing that Bittaker had told me about, that Douglas Clark would sit on the prison yard and talk about pony girls cutting off the limbs, and I had mentioned it to you, and you said, oh my God, he used to talk to Don about something similar. And I wanted you guys to elaborate.
Yeah, India, babe.
I didn't know if you wanted to say it. He said that when he was young, like an adolescent, they lived, he used to, kind of walk around the streets of India, and he spent a lot of time with the sex workers there. And he learned a lot about pleasing women. So he had a lot of, now this is the way he presented it to me, because he dipped his toe in the same conversation, but he didn't go in that direction like he did with you about the, cutting off the limbs. But he talked about, like, prolonged orgasms and this sort of like tantric thing. And you have to be like, okay, reel it in, Doug. And he stopped, but because, Wicked Witch, pony, riding the wave.
It's known as apotemnophilia. That was his. There's a term for it, and I'm wondering if, because it usually starts around 6 or 7 is when it develops. If you have this disorder, apotemnophilia. I'm wondering if he was in India at that time. Maybe he saw, limbs missing. That's where it could have possibly developed from.
It's so strange because his background, he came from a privileged background, and
very privileged,
which is very strange too. And he was highly educated, privileged background. I think that's part of his, where he figured out how to manipulate people through speech and through intellect and through persuasiveness, and because he's very, like I said, he's a very dynamic person. He doesn't let you get a word in edgewise. He's like, it's hard to have with someone him who owns all the words. He owns all the words in the conversation.
But that's his downfall too, because that sense of entitlement just killed him. He sat in the courtroom and just thought that he was not going to be found guilty. Clearly, he's calling the judge cocksucker. Like, he thinks he can do that, and it is okay because of his life of privilege.
Yeah, he was Bundy. He thought he wanted to represent himself and make the courtroom into a theater, a circus. He was exactly like Bundy. That was Clark.
Exactly.
Yeah.
See that, and that's what so kind of goes back to what we were talking about, like how this whole dynamic with these serial killers. It's very strange. Very strange. There's so many aspects to these murders. I mean, we have his phone book from the 1970s, and because he was his own attorney, he was able to get that back. And Cindy Chandler's phone number is in it. And it's really creepy to see, because you're looking at this phone book from like the 70s and Cindy's name is in it. So, just it's a deep rabbit hole, and I mean, we want to help you however we can, Laura.
Yeah, and I really appreciate it. We all appreciate it, and
we absolutely appreciate it, because this case has always bothered Laura and I. I don't know if she's told you this. We're working with a genealogist, and there's she's connecting a lot of these serial killers back to the Mayflower, and we found out that Laura and I are cousins, and
we're cousins.
Doug Clark and Laura and I are cousins. Like
10 we're related to Doug Clark.
What a cool family reunion.
That's so fucked up. But we've been like, we couldn't figure out like why we couldn't let this, like, there's a lot of cases, but this case really bothers us. Like, we can't stop talking about it. Mm-hmm. We've been on and on with this since we the first time I knew she was talking to him, I'm like, this case is very disturbing, and there's so many more victims still out there. I mean, we live in Santa Clarita Valley, and someone over here just did a little article over here where they're like, oh, there's at least 10 more bodies out here in Santa Clarita. I mean, they don't really know. I called that reporter and I was like, where'd you get this info? And they're like, well, it's just what the cops are saying. Like, they think there's about maybe 10 more bodies. But Laura, you think there's more than that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's right now, what we know is 4 unidentified with Clark. That's 4.
Babe, tell him about the autopsy reports.
Which one?
That's kind of the ones that were very questionable.
Well, when I went in to get the autopsy reports, Exie Wilson's was no longer there. It was missing. I got most of the victims. One, they had another, and I have messages from the coroner, and they're like, we don't know why this is not here, because it's microfiche or whatever. But then we got a suicide slipped into one of them, right? Remember that? But
that's what I'm saying. Like the other autopsy reports we got that we didn't ask for, but they were in with the Sunset case. They were in with those. So very strange. Like one girl being thrown off of, and they had to do with the freeway, right, honey? They were like,
yeah, it was the freeway. And then another thing is that when in death penalty cases, they're not supposed to get rid of the transcripts for the case, right?
Never, never.
But guess whose court transcript has been purged?
Doug Clark's.
Yes.
Yep.
Same with Bittaker's. Bittaker's was too.
And I have a letter saying, so there it is. And I got Carol's preliminary transcript. I was able to get that because I don't think they're watching her as they're guarding Clark's stuff. Yeah.
And why do you think that is? Why do you think they're guarding it so much?
Well, look at this real quick. Go ahead, baby. Go ahead.
I want to hear what you're going to say.
I was going to say what I was telling Laura the other night was, remember the Manson case. Supposedly, Susan Atkins stabbed Sharon Tate and wanted to take the baby out of her and all this stuff. They were going to initially first give her a deal to walk, to testify against everybody else. So when you mentioned that there's a third killer with the toolbox, I think it's that what LAPD does to close the case, they'll let a killer walk. I really do. Why would anybody give Susan Atkins a deal when she's the one that broke the whole Manson case open with her admitting that she stabbed Sharon Tate? I mean, and she was going to walk just for testifying against Tex Watson and Charles Manson.
Yeah,
so
well,
we got
that's that whole thing they want to close. When they have serial killer cases like that, they want to close them quick and they want to shut the door real quick because it's such a public relations nightmare. They did the same thing. They did the same thing with Ing, with what's her name? They gave her. We still can't figure out. Charles Leonard Lake's ex-wife. I mean, they gave her like this sweetheart deal, and she was involved. She was definitely involved.
That woman should be facing the death penalty right now. She should be rotting in prison. And I'll say that what I know from that case, she was absolutely involved. There's no doubt about it. She knew about everything. And like she went there the night before and cleaned the house up before the cops got there. And it's they will let them do that. That's why when Laura was telling me about a third killer, it wasn't surprising at all.
So I've tracked down and spoken to, and when I went back and asked the DA, it was like, oh, I don't know about that. They don't. That's the thing. It's like that's why they don't want us to have Clark's files.
Yeah.
I got Bittaker's, and it was like Pandora's box. They don't want it out to the public. They don't want people like myself or Cindy and Rob because we're gonna blow it up and be like, look at this.
Yeah. I mean, even the guy that spent time in LA County Jail with Lawrence, that we interviewed. What was his name? I can't remember. Carlo. I mean, he even though he was one, he goes, yeah, that guy, he was involved. I don't know why is he walking around?
Carlo and Anthony both stated that. They go, Bittaker told us about Knott's Berry Farm. I have a report where Bittaker actually tells the investigators, I killed somebody at Knott's Berry Farm with Norris and another guy. Never once brought to court.
Never
Bittaker
mentioned.
Tells investigators. Yeah.
See, that's the same thing. Don has met with Doug's attorney. They like she was saying, the coroner had no idea why the two decapitated victims were missing. We got the other autopsy reports of other people that we didn't ask for, that sound just like they could be the Sunset victims. So this is a cover up of. There's no doubt about it. I just don't know how deep it goes, and me and Don have just got to a place where it's too much for us. It's too much. We just want to focus on things that make us happy, not thinking about, like we have been for the past 4 years, decapitated heads and all this.
Well, I think it's a combination. Knowing police departments and bureaucracies like we do, it's a combination of ineptness and cover up. It's just like they just want to, people don't really know what's going on. I mean, usually the task force and the investigators who are on the case are usually, in the DA's office, the prosecutor, are usually the only ones that know what's going on, really. And then all the other people don't. And so once it's closed, those cases are put in boxes and they're put in storage. And a lot of times we go looking for documents They've been destroyed. There was a fire. There was a flood. And it's just easy for them to just not have to deal with it that way. We deal with it all day long doing these cold cases where they're not even current cases that are hot right now. They'll drag their feet on until their hand is put to the fire through publicity, through news. And that's just the way it is. That's just because they're so overwhelmed with other cases. And if it's out of sight, out of mind.
Yeah.
And so I don't think it's a big, huge conspiracy. I think it's just the way bureaucracies operate.
And the time of it, there was no internet. You know, it was a different time. There was no cell phones. People lost track of people. People came to Hollywood. They were leaving bad situations most of the time. So there was very disposable victims in Hollywood on the Sunset Strip. He always was picking on prostitutes. It's the same with Gary Ridgway. That time period, it seemed like it was easy to get away with serial killings because people weren't paying attention. And that's why it's an interesting, fascinating time.
But they all had, military experience, a lot of these guys. Some of them in Vietnam. So it's like you don't know whether or not that, and we know that a lot of these guys started when they were teenagers and, and then went to Vietnam and then came back or went into the military, came back. A lot of them had military experience. So you don't know what is going on with that makeup is. And that time, the late 60s, 70s and early 80s. I mean, there were so many things. It wasn't like it now. You could get away with a lot.
Well,
you can do it very easily.
Another weird thing, honey, why don't you bring up like the them having his DNA since 92?
Yeah, and they never tested it. They just won't do that. The polygraph stuff.
They've had his DNA since 1992, and there's never been anything that came back. Not a rape, not an assault, nothing has ever come back to Doug Clark and his DNA. So that's
a closed case. It's a closed case.
Exactly.
It's a closed case.
Exactly.
As soon as he's behind bars, they're not going to spend any more resources. They're not going to spend any more money to kind of look into something that's already taken care of.
Well, I'm curious, like after talking to him for as long as you guys did and getting to know him so deeply and intimately, what do you guys think? What's your theory on him and possibly other victims? Or
Babe, you want to go ahead and take that one and I'll tell mine after?
I think that and Laura, I was going to ask you what you think about the cops going out to Arkansas, but I'll answer this first. I think that, like what David was saying, there's money to be made off of snuff films and human bodies and sex trafficking. And if you are a sex trafficker, your product is no longer of value to you, or it's pissing you off, then what do you do with it? It's like, that sounds so gross and so disgusting, but they refer to these women and men that are sex workers as less alive, and it's disgusting. Yeah. So, I mean, if that's how established agencies are talking about them, we know that, people that are, they're like you were saying, they're throwaway people, unfortunately.
The Hillside Stranglers were before they started killing women, they were running prostitutes. That's what they were doing. And they were making money off of running prostitutes. That's fact. It's in the police files, everything. So human trafficking, Carol grooming, I think it was all the snut films, like Don was saying. I think it's all was just, they were part of a group of people that collectively just were like the orgy crowd of the 70s. And then there was another, just like the orgy crowd of the 70s, there was another group of people that wanted deeper and deeper perversions and deeper perversions. And I think that's where Doug, Carol, Jack, and whoever else, I think that's what was the whole Sunset case was about. I really do.
And getting kicks, but and Jack was reported to be sadistic and violent towards women. He broke his wife's arm. I mean, he held a gun on a kid. I mean, so this is not a nice person, and then the connections just with Angela Bono. It's just, I don't know. That's me. I agree with David.
Well, I will say, and Cindy, Rob, and David, you guys, I've mentioned this case to you that I'm working with Rob. It's a serial killer up north. Don't say the name.
I know.
But there is a snuff film connection we have found.
Absolutely.
And it was the same time frame in the early 80s. And, back then it wasn't the internet. So they actually had to go to a video store, say, a password. So it wouldn't be out of the realm of possibility of they could have met at a video store saying, I want this or that. Because, you had to do it in person, back then.
I was in the punk scene in the 80s. I was into that deeply, and I was in a band, and everybody knew everybody. You knew the people. Like now, today, the guys that go to the gigs still with their kids and stuff, you knew who was around back then because it was this community. It's the same thing with these perverts, man. I really believe so. With the pedophiles, the people that like snuff, all that stuff. I think it really was like you were saying. You can't. There was no internet, so you had to go out and look for it. You know what I mean? And you had to. Yeah. So these people, I think, what was happening is there was people making money, like Don said.
Right.
There was business to be made, and at the same time, they were getting the sex kicks that they wanted. So I could see when Carol said, well, Doug wanted to get into necrophilia because he probably exhausted every other thing he did before. You know what I mean? So that's believable. I could see that. It's just, it's just not. I just think it's just not as cut and dry as they make it out to be. And we have documents showing that it's not as cut and dry that it is.
Right.
Yeah. So, well, it is, like Laura, you've spoken to this before where, it escalates. It starts off small and then
100%. It's an escalation. It's a progression. It doesn't start off as just like necrophilia. I mean, that's later in the progression, which is also telling of like if Doug was already there, where did he start from? What age did he start from? Yeah, you don't go from 0 to 100. It is an escalation. Every serial killer has reported to me, it starts off light and it keeps escalating and escalating. And usually, just like with the Lake case, I mean, he told a girlfriend, he's like, I want to orgasm by death, like kill the girl and orgasm. And she was like, that's weird. And that was 20 years before his crime, So you're looking at the time span. Exactly. Yeah.
That's what they did to Zero in the Manson family. Somebody was I'm going to be graphic here, so hope it's okay. But this
don't get too graphic. Don't get too graphic.
I'm not going to say. I'll just say this. Supposedly, somebody was on top of Zero from the Manson family, and at a certain time, they blew his head off. Let's just leave it at that. So there's, what I mean? We're talking about the same cops, the same prosecutors, and the same criminals. So it's
the same incompetence.
Area.
Yeah. Well, it's them kind of herding through the crime. It's like they're just kind of it's a wave, and they just get there and they're like, all right, well, we can take this crime, but we can't take these waves. We can just handle one wave at a time. And and it's a process. And the thing is that we've dealt with wrongful conviction cases and stuff like that. And it gets deep and it's labor intensive. And prosecutors, they want to make sure a lot of times they only get one shot to get these people. So if they don't have a clear shot, they're gonna just move on until they get a clear shot.
Plus the fact that the victims, like we said before, they were on the fringe and there wasn't really people looking for them. You know what I mean? It makes a difference. It wasn't like a blonde college student or, you know what I mean? It's different.
Yeah.
And so those victims, unfortunately, a lot of them are still missing.
Yeah. If it was a congressman's daughter, it'd be a totally different story.
Right.
That's what I mean. That's why I said Cindy and Gina, had it not been for them, I don't think there would have been a Sunset case. I really don't. Now, another thing is LAPD took it on the chin by not catching the Hillside Stranglers. It was Washington State that caught the Hillside Stranglers by catching what's his name, that jackass with Kenneth Bianchi. They caught him and then shared their information with LA, and that's how they solved the case. So they took it on the chin there, and then the next case was the Sunset case. So they needed somebody to prosecute, even if it was just one person. It just like Manson, they let people walk that should have been still be locked up, like Clem from the Manson family. All he did is have to show where they buried one of the victims, and they let him out of jail in 1984. So to get Manson, they'll let a lot of people free. To get Doug, they'll let a lot of people walk. So it's just how it seems like how it operates.
It's horse trading.
It is the game of choosing the lesser evil. Unfortunately, sometimes
the bigger fish. They want the big fish.
Yeah, if your friends are involved in the case, then you turn the other way.
Right.
Yeah.
So
there's that. Just saying that.
Yeah.
Well, guys. Well, listen. This
No more.
this has been really enlightening, and I think we'll probably, if you guys wouldn't mind, we'd love to come and check back with you. Because I just got those auto recordings, and I got the chance to listen to some of them. Let us, Laura and us, kind of dive in, and then maybe we'll probably have more questions for you. And if you don't mind, we can have you back on, and we can kind of discuss more. Because now that we know,
this is Laura's thing now. I mean, seriously. So we'll do whatever we can.
I was going to say that, like,
Laura,
we're out.
We're out. Seriously,
we're out.
If a person has DID, they're
all you guys.
All those memories. You hear what I'm saying? Do you hear what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Say it again.
So
say it again.
If a person has DID, an alter will have the memories. If the
correct.
So if Carol, and I'm not suggesting any diagnosis, but and I know you have to leave. I just wanted to say that if that's the direction you're going, just don't forget that part because there could be another.
No, you're right. But sometimes, it's the core personality, and say like there's core and then there's 1, 2. So core will have the memories of personality 1 and 2. And then personality 1 will have the memories of 1 and 2. And then 2 will have no idea that 1 or core exists.
Yeah. Hey, talk to me about that all the time. I did postgraduate training at the Institute.
I really want to specialize in DID, actually. Yeah.
That's one of my things that I do is work with folks with DID. So text me.
No way.
Yeah.
Oh my God, that's awesome.
One's a therapist.
Yeah. So I just want to, you don't think that Carol has DID from the tapes you've heard and everything?
I mean, my brain goes to personality disorder first, right? Mm-hmm. But the thing is, and I know we're at time, but we can talk about that another time off the air. So I can be an ethical person start just diagnosing people.
Yeah.
Sounds great.
And let me just say one more thing really quick. Those tapes are just the tip of the iceberg of what we have. So you guys got to figure out how you want to go through it so we can get you what we have, because those tapes are just they're really nothing compared to everything else.
Yeah. Whoa. Well, see, but that's the thing, and that it drains us. Yeah. That's right, Laura. We're done. We're done. We'll talk
I know. They just gave us Pandora's box, guys.
That's what they gave us. So much,
guys. Stay on real quick. We're gonna stop recording, but just stay on.
Yeah. Just